Hey everybody, welcome to Bestie Book Reviews. I'm here with my bestie Mandy.
And I'm here with my bestie Jessica. And today we're going to be telling Jessica's story. A lot of you have asked about it. I have encouraged her to do this, and
Yeah.
she is excited to do this. We asked for your questions, which we have put together. Jessica kind of went through them already, so she's just able to give a little more thorough answer for all of them and kind of outline them in a way that she felt would work more like flow with her story. So you might, if you were one of the people who put in some questions, you might notice your questions are broken up, and that's just to kind of make that story flow. So we are talking about the BRCA gene and Jessica's choices with that. And we also will sprinkle in book recs throughout that deal with this very subject. So we're very excited about this. We feel like this is such an important topic to share this message with everyone. So
Yeah, it really is.
And we also want to sprinkle in those book recs too,
Because, that makes it fun and relevant. So yay!
All right.
Okay. All right.
Let's just dive right in.
Let's do that.
Okay. So the first question is about, is this genetic?
Yeah. So I have BRCA 2. Well, we all have BRCA 1 and BRCA 2. Everybody has the BRCA gene. There's two of them. And if yours should be negative, that's how it typically is. If you're BRCA 1 or 2 negative, your BRCA gene is working properly. If you're BRCA positive, it means that your gene is not fighting cancer like it's supposed to. So BRCA stands for breast cancer, so the BR and then the CA, so breast cancer. And those two genes are supposed to keep you from developing breast cancer, but not only breast cancer, ovarian cancer, pancreatic cancer, some types of melanoma. I think there's another one in there too. There's several different types of cancer that if your BRCA gene is positive, it puts you at risk for. So yes, that is what we're dealing with.
So what happened that prompted you to get tested?
Okay, so my sister developed breast cancer in the summer of 2020. And so when that happened, she was under the age of 40. And if you're under the age of 40, and I don't know if this is a state by state thing or if this is just a general blanket thing, but if you're under the age of 40, you automatically are tested for genetic cancers because it's unlikely that you would typically have cancer at a young age, like especially breast cancer, if it's not a genetic cancer. So my sister was tested. She came back BRCA positive. At the time, I was actually getting ready to go in for a hysterectomy. And so my OBGYN that I was talking to, her major in college was in genetics, and then her minor was gynecology, I guess. I'm not sure. But anyhow, she and I were talking about it, and I mentioned it just on the fly, like, oh yeah, my sister has cancer, and they just said it was that it's genetic. And she was like, wait a second, like if your sister has it, you have a 50-50 chance of having it, so we need to test you before we go in for your hysterectomy. And so I didn't understand what was really happening at that point. And so she ordered the kit because if you get tested and you have family members who've been tested, they like to keep you all at the same lab so that the lab techs can compare. So like when other people are tested in your family, like they have everybody grouped in one spot and they know what they're looking for. And so she ordered the kit. We tested like literally days before my hysterectomy, and she'd asked me, she's like, do you want to push it out? Because they were only gonna take one ovary, leave the other one. They were gonna take everything else, leave an ovary. And I was like, no, I don't want to push out my hysterectomy. I was in a lot of pain. It just needed to happen. And I said, my sister and I are so different. Like, she's a brunette. I'm a blonde. She's 6 feet tall. I'm 5'7". Like, we're so different. We look nothing alike. And I was like, I am not going to have this gene. And then it takes about 3 weeks for the test to come back. And so about 3 weeks later, I got the phone call that yes, I was BRCA positive and that we did leave an ovary. So it's probably going to have to come out later. And, but at that point I was prepared. So,
yeah. So the next question, were there early signs or symptoms, which I think you've covered?
No, I think for a lot of families there are, because in a lot of families you would see people say, oh, breast cancer runs in our family, or I had an aunt and a mom and a cousin and whatever that all had breast cancer at young ages. And so for a lot of families, you can see that, like, there's a pattern. But for mine, if you would have asked me before this if breast cancer ran in our family or cancer in general, I would have said no, absolutely not, because my sister is the only person to have breast cancer in our family, other than like my great aunt and my great great grandma, who they were in their 80s when they developed it. So I would have told you no, but it depends on the family. But no, there's no symptoms. Nope.
I want to jump ahead a question, but I'm going to stick in your order.
Okay.
So what led you to ultimately move forward with the surgery?
I looked at my options, and basically they were move forward with the surgery and prevent this from happening. Wait until breast cancer showed up. My chances of getting breast cancer were like 85% in my lifetime. Like, that was the chance of me getting breast cancer. And if I waited, if I just kind of took the preventative watch method, it meant that I was going in twice a year. Once a year I would go in for a mammogram, and then I would go in on the 6 months later for an ultrasound or an MRI of my breast. And I was constantly going to have to be going in for testing. And I knew, so I found out in September, and my mastectomy was in December. And just in that little bit of time, like every time there was a weird twinge or an itch or whatever, I would freak out. And so I didn't want to do that. So my husband and I kind of sat down. I barely took a week to pray about it. Like, it was pretty much a, yep, this is what we're going to do decision.
We talked a lot about it during that time. And I remember you were like, if I feel this anxious right now, I don't want to live the rest of my life constantly worried, because one, that's not good for your body. It's not good for your mental health either. And so that was something that was really concerning to you, to constantly always have the anxiety, and then like maybe put it out of your mind, but then it's time to go back for another scan, and then just constantly living in that cycle for years and years, waiting for it just to happen.
Yeah. And that's just not healthy. Like you said, that's really not healthy. And I know people say that I have a choice, but I don't feel like that was a choice. I felt like you're between a rock and a hard place. So what do you do? I want to be here and my kids get married. I want to see my grandkids. Like, that's what you do. I can't believe I get emotional about this. It's been so many years, but it's the truth. I wanted to be here for my kids. I wanted to grow old with my husband. Like, why would you wait? You're getting all the clip now too. Oh, I wanted to grow old with Mandy.
Thank you.
We have a plan.
We do.
We have a plan.
Jeez.
So, yeah. So it was a hard decision to make. It was really hard, but I did it very quickly. So, and I didn't, this is what we're going to do.
Yes.
So, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Let's book wreck it.
Okay. So, I have, so this is a trilogy. It's not a trilogy. There's 3 books in a series. I'm grabbing these. I've only read the first one, not the last 2, but when I was going through all of this, or when we first started our channel, we kind of joked around about writing books. And I've always said, like, I think it'd be awesome to write a book about some girls who go to like a support group, and they each have their own story with their own reconstruction or whatever. Like, that was kind of something we talked about. And then I found that Catherine R. Beale actually has something similar to that. So this is the first book in the series. I've read this one before. This is her Unbrackable Women's. Really?
Damn it, I was trying to move it over to you so we could see the book.
See the books? Okay, can you do it?
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
I'm on the right person.
So this is the Unbrackable Women's series. Is the first book in it. So this is Ready for Whatever. And these are about, and then she also has Seize the Day, which is number 2, and then Underneath It All, which is number 3. So, and there is dust on that book because it has been sitting on my bookshelf. Okay, so all 3 of these are about women who have gone through breast cancer, who all have the BRCA gene, not necessarily gone through breast cancer, but they all have the BRCA gene and how they deal with it. it's been a while since I read these books. But our heroine in this one has had a mastectomy and she's had reconstruction. And I believe she's had mastectomy and reconstruction at this point. And she's dating. And I think it was a neighbor kind of situation. I really enjoyed this one. I don't remember a lot about it, so I'm not going to go into great detail. So all of Catherine's books. So Catherine is a fade to black writer, which means that all of her books have low spice. Like you see the situation escalate. You might see a little bit of, there's some kissing, some foreplay, that kind of thing. And then it fades to black. Like you don't see, they're not open door bedroom scenes. You don't see the intimacy on page. So then we'll just jump into the next thing. Did not bother me at all. I really enjoyed this first book. I've intended to read all three. I believe all three are on audio. And she did it right as far as BRCA and whatever. She did her research. She had friends. She had a friend that was going through it, I believe is what she had told me when we talked about it. And that's where she got a lot of her information. So she did her research. The BRCA gene is well represented in this, and the journey is well represented in the story. So, and Catherine is cute. I watch her on TikTok every once in a while, and she's this little baby indie author, and she's just desperate for people to read her books. But I do watch her, and I think she's cute as all get out, and her writing's great. So, yeah, check that out.
Okay.
Okay.
So, what was your experience like when you found out about your BRCA gene?
My doctor called. So my OBGYN called me. I think it was even on a weekend that she called me. I was really close with her because my third pregnancy was really high risk. And so she would call me on the weekends and stuff then too. So we've known each other for a while. And she has a gene in her family. It's not BRCA, but it is a breast cancer gene. She doesn't have it, but some of her sisters do. So she knew what was going on here. She knew how this was going to feel. So I remember when she called me and just kind of being in shock. I was thoroughly thinking that I was going to be negative. And I was going to be in shock. And I felt like everything moved very quickly for what it was. So you got to remember, this was in 2020. This is in the summer of 2020 or September of 2020 when I was told this. And we were in full lockdown, especially here in Washington State. We were in lockdown during the majority of all of this. So it was hard because there was questions of, am I going to get to have surgery? Because technically this is elective, even though it's not elective. And right before my mastectomy, like days before my mastectomy, we got the call that the governor had stopped elective surgeries in the state. And so there was that question of whether I'm going to get it or not. There was a lot of question about whether I was going to get surgery or what I was going to do. I think what kind of prepared me a lot for this is that about a week before I got my test results, my sister had her mastectomy, and she just had one side, and then because she had a liver condition, they later down the road did the other side. But they did the one side that has cancer. And our family drove the 4.5, 5 hours down to my parents' house to be with my sister that weekend when she had the surgery. So I had already seen what it looked like. I'd already seen and gone through the emotional turmoil that my sister had. So I was pretty prepared. But I don't think anything can prepare you for it. It's kind of one of those, oh my gosh, what do we do now? But I'm kind of one of those people that when I'm told, like, and you know this, like when I have my mind made up to do something, we're doing it. And how am I going to get it done? Kind of a thing, So, yeah. Mandy makes this spreadsheet stuff.
Question.
Do you?
I do. And then I see that you didn't just leave in the question, you left in their explanation.
Oh, I know which one this is. Yeah.
So how old are you?
Well, would you like to finish that question up or do you want me to?
Oh, the person
I'm 45.
says, sorry about the age question. You look really young for BC.
That's my favorite person now. I'm 45, and she's right. The people who typically get breast cancer are older unless you have the gene that affects you younger. So that's why I said if you get breast cancer before the age of 40, you are automatically tested for the gene. So I was 40 when all this went down. And I've seen, like, in my BRCA support group, there are girls in their 20s who are having these surgeries or who are developing breast cancer. So yes, it depends on which BRCA gene you have. BRCA1, you're at a slightly higher risk versus BRCA2, but they're both very high risks. So, yeah.
So how old are you? No, I'm kidding.
Ha ha. Same age
Okay.
as you.
I am much younger than you, but okay. How did you remain positive for your children and husband pre and post surgery?
Well, I mean, I had moments, trust me guys, I had moments of breaking down. Um I I think watching my sister go through her mastectomy was helpful. My sister was a wreck. She was a mess, and it was my mom and my sister and my grandma and I were all down taking care of her during this time, and that was a bonding moment at that time. But I also knew that I didn't want she was so emotional, and I just didn't want it to be that way. I found out early on that Seattle Cancer Care Alliance is where I went for my surgeries and stuff, and they offered counseling for making this decision or for going through this. So I did meet with a counselor a few times and did a little bit of that. But a lot of it was my husband and kids were my support system. The kids were in their earlier teens. My oldest was, I think, 15 at the time. The youngest was 11. So they were supportive. Jeff was amazing. I had amazing friends that were supporting me at the time. My family, it was a different situation with family, so that's where friends came in. My family didn't understand the decision I was making, and I see that a lot in the support group where people, extended family, don't understand why we would make this decision, and it just baffles me. But yeah, so they were my support. I did have bad days. I remember I had to wrap Christmas presents early that year because I had surgery. Was it like December 12th or something? And I knew I wouldn't have use of my arms for about 4 months, because when you have a mastectomy, you can't move your arms more than like this. Like you're like T-Rex arms for 4 weeks. And so I knew that wrapping Christmas presents was not something that I would be doing. And so I had to wrap all the kids' Christmas presents before, and my son's birthday presents before I went in for surgery. And I remember standing in our closet where I hide all the presents and just losing it, breaking down. And Jeff heard, he was there immediately. And he, just, it was like the one breakdown that I had, because that was hard. I was sacrificing a part of my body that, I mean, granted, they were saggy, they weren't the greatest, and I mean, they'd been through 3 kids. I was 40, but you were opting to mutilate yourself is what it felt like at the time.
So how has this affected your children, and when and how are you talking to them about getting tested?
So I'm a firm believer in being open with my kids. We have a very open relationship with all 3 of our kids. My kids knew from day one what was happening. They were involved in the process. They didn't necessarily see the breakdowns, but that was probably because they weren't here. I mean, they would see me get teary every once in a while. But I knew that my kids have a 50-50 chance of having the BRCA gene, and I wanted them to see that this isn't something that was going to define them. This isn't who they are if they have it. Like, this is just going to be something that they'll have to address later in life once they're done having their children, and that this is, if they have the gene, they'll have to think about that. But I didn't want our lives to be all about the BRCA and what mom was going through. So we kept up a normal life, but they were a part of decision making. I mean, to a point, they were kids. We told them what the decisions were going to be. One thing you do is when you have these surgeries, because mine was a delayed DIEP. So I had a mastectomy and then I had DIEP. So I had a mastectomy in December, and then I had the DIEP flap reconstruction was done in April. And in between then, I had an infection in my tissue expander. So I had surgery then too. So there was a lot of surgeries, and I would have drains. You have the drains that come out of your body. And my middle child, who wants to go into the medical field, she removed my drains. Like, my husband supervised, he was taught how to do it, but she was so into removing my drains. She thought it was great. The kids were they know. Actually, right now we are waiting for my middle child's test to come back. So it should be back within a week or two. My oldest, I need to take him in to get his, because they don't test them until they're 18. So my kids all know. And you'll hear my daughters every once in a while joke about, how small their boobs are, but someday they might get bigger ones. Because it's not defining who they are. It's just something that is a possibility in the future. And I pray all the time that we'll have better options for them when they get to that age. But right now we don't.
Was it painful?
Karen asked that question. Yes. I will say I would never wish a mastectomy on my worst enemy. That was the worst pain. I don't know if you remember when I was going through that. That was the worst pain ever. And part of that is because, and I didn't have lymph nodes removed or anything, 'cause that makes it worse. But I mean, they go in and they scrape everything out. They scrape all your breast tissue out. And so, and then on top of that, they put in a tissue expander because I knew that I was going to have reconstruction and they need to stretch that skin, right? So they put it in flat and then you go in every 3 weeks and have it expanded with saline into the expander. And they're like, and I know I've told you this before, but you know those rubber balls that we played with at recess when we were kids? It's what they're like this big around, and they go in there and it makes it feel like you have, as they fill them up, they're cold and it's painful every time you go in for a fill for 2 or 3 days. I lived on muscle relaxers. They do a nerve blocker for the first 3 days, and it wears off after the first 3 days when they do the initial surgery. And I remember it was a Sunday afternoon. It was just before our pharmacy closed, and I was sobbing because the pain was so bad. Yeah, I never wish that on anybody. I lived on muscle relaxers. And then the deep flap, I don't honestly, I know that it was a week in the hospital, and I know that I was in a lot of pain because it's basically a transplant. I was on the transplant floor because my lower portion of my stomach, the skin and the fat and the blood vessels were removed. And then it was brought up to the breast and it was made into a boob, right? And then everything else was pulled down. And I know it was painful. I stood like my posture was like this. I was bent over for 8 weeks. I couldn't stand up straight. But I don't remember a lot of the pain. I think that's, it's been 4 years now. This month is my 4-year anniversary month of reconstruction. I don't remember a lot, which is the beauty in getting past it. You tend to forget. So
it's like having a child.
It is. I do remember the first time I had fat grafting, which is a fancy word for liposuction, where they suck fat out of your body and in one spot and put it into your boob, as they're sculpting and stuff after the fact. Because what happens is I had delayed deep. Some places will do the mastectomy and the deep procedure in the same day, but that is a lot of surgery. So I had my mastectomy, my infection. Then I had deep in April, and then every 3 months after that I would go in for another surgery where they would, because my boobs were eye cups when I came out of surgery. I had that much fat, I had a hang down belly, and I just did. And they don't want to spend any extra time because it's very tedious. They're connecting blood vessels. They don't want to spend extra time sculpting at that point. They want to know that your blood vessels are working and attaching and healing. Then they go in and they kind of whittle them down and sculpt them. So I would go in every 3 months for this surgery. And I do remember my first time having the fat grafting and coming out and being like, oh my God, I felt like I'd been run over by a Mack truck. But then the second and the third and the fourth time, I might have been a fifth time. I think it was a fourth. I had 8 surgeries, but by then I'd built up enough scar tissue that the pain really wasn't there. So, I don't know that I want to do it anymore though.
Book rec.
Okay, I read this one this week. Guarded by the Kraken by Cassie Alexander. So in this one, this is the story about Elle. She's a scientist, and she has, so this is in a paranormal world like this. We have monsters in this world. And so her job, like her specialty is languages, monster languages. And so she is actually taken to, I think it was the Mariana Trench. She's in a trench of some kind, and she's brought there on a secret mission. Some billionaire has her down there for reasons, and it's all very hush hush. She doesn't even know what she's there for until after she gets there, and then it's all classified. And she is we know that she has the BRCA gene. Don't know which one. We know she has a BRCA gene. Her sister got cancer and died, and then she went in, had the mastectomy, and stayed flat. And so she has a lot of hangups about that. Her husband decided that he wants a divorce because now that she has the BRCA gene, she said that she doesn't want to have kids because she doesn't want to pass that on to her kids, and she's scared of doing that. And her husband didn't want to adopt. He doesn't want anything but biological children, and so he basically is ending their relationship when she gets down there. And then she meets our hero, who is our Kraken guard. Now, he has lost a wife and a child in an accident many years earlier, and the Kraken speak telepathically, and so he has to bond with her. Like, he just kind of touches her, and then the bond happens, and then they can speak telepathically. But when he does that, he realizes that she's his fated mate. But how do you do that when she's in a suit the whole time? Like, she can't get out of the suit. But anyhow, loved it. It's great. The BRCA representation was great in here. So The audio was good too. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was involved in your recovery?
It kind of depends on the recovery, which one. So for the mastectomy, which really was like the start of everything, I couldn't use my arms for about 4 weeks. Jeff had to shower with me and wash my hair for the first few days before I could figure out how to do it that way. It was great. Having somebody else wash your hair is great.
Oh, that would be nice, but I'm
yeah,
just
that was
thinking
nice.
of like your.
Well, yeah, and we're tall, right? Like my Jeff is over 6 feet. He's 6'1" or whatever, and then I'm 5'7". And so everything's like up on shelves, like in our kitchen. I remember like I couldn't reach the plates and stuff. I couldn't even get a glass out of the cupboard without help. That one was compared to what happened for the diep, that was actually pretty minimal. Like I couldn't drive for a month. I couldn't use my arms for a month. That was really painful. And then I'd have to go down every 3 weeks and have the tissue expanders put in and still continue to be in pain. Now with diep, that was way different because not necessarily different. It was just a lot more. I couldn't sit up on my own. I couldn't use my core for a month. And I couldn't use my arms for like 6 to 8 weeks. So that was a lot more because you could, if you pushed yourself up or pulled, then you could rip what they'd sewn together. And there was a lot more damage. So Jeff had to learn how to lift me out of bed. I had to sleep on a lot of people sleep in recliners. I can't do it. I had wedge pillows, legs were up, body was up. I did that too with the mastectomy, the wedge pillows. Jeff had to lift me out of bed for the first month, and I pee a lot at night. I feel so sorry for this guy because he was lifting me out of bed quite often. It was a lot of downtime. I got a lot of reading in when I wasn't sleeping. I don't remember a whole bunch about it. I just remember I had low mobility. I couldn't do a lot. My drains got infected. I had those stinking drains. I had 4 drains after diep. I had 2 after the mastectomy, 1 after the tissue expander was removed because it was infected, and that was a week in the hospital. And then 4 after surgery. Those drains were a nightmare. I had my one drain was in for 8 weeks in my hip, and it really irritated my skin and stuff. So, there's a lot.
So this is not a question that was put on here, but I just thought because you're talking about having all these different surgeries. So from the start of you finding out, your first surgery was several months later in December of 2020.
Yeah, I found out September, December.
So how long was your entire journey with this from basically like when you had your, do you see what I'm saying?
Yep, 2 years. So I found out in September of 2020 that I was BRCA positive. I had surgery in December. I got an infection in February. I had diep in early April. And then I had the other surgeries after the fact. And my last surgery was in October of 2022.
So I just wanted people to understand this was not just like a quick journey.
No. And I think in my mind, I thought it would be because I'd been doing research on what kind of reconstruction. And there's a reason why I chose diep flap reconstruction over breast implants. My body doesn't like foreign things. Like it rejected my belly button piercing when I was in my 20s. It rejected the expander, the tissue expander, which is why it got infected. And so I knew that having breast implants was not something that I wanted to do because I was afraid that my body would reject it, and where would I be? So what I chose to do was use my own tissue to create boobs. Plus, hey, it gave me a flat tummy. I mean, and I got bigger boobs than what I had before. It was great. So, but it was a 2-year-long journey. I thought it would just be like a one and done kind of thing when I first walked into it. And then I realized what I was really walking into. But
so the next questions, there's 3 of them. They kind of all go together. So I'll read all of them. What is the outcome post-surgery for likelihood of breast cancer anyway? Does it remove it completely? And how do you cope with this?
So there's no way a doctor can get all the breast tissue ever. The part of the reason why we remove the nipples is because I could have kept, my doctor said my nipples pointed too far south to actually keep them. I'd have had to have a breast lift and then have the mastectomy to retain nipples. And you wouldn't have kept nipple sensation anyway. So what was the point at that point? But if you keep your nipples, then you have like a 3% chance of having breast cancer because they can't get all the tissue out of the nipple. When they do a mastectomy and they scrape all that out, there's still a possibility they could leave something behind. And they say it's typically like here, like on the bone, around, like that's where you would find it. And so I think your chances are less than 2%, but there is always a chance that they didn't get all the tissue. My doctor keeps telling me it's very, very, very low, but there is a chance. And we did have a scare earlier this year in February where I felt a lump, and I've got the little scar right there where they went in and they took the biopsy, and it turned out to be necrosis, fat necrosis, which happens because my stomach fat was put into my breast. But I do go in for I could go in for CA 125 blood tests, and I have done that. I'm supposed to do that like every 3 months, but it really is a pain in the butt. Not every doctor tells you that. Like, a lot of doctors say that it doesn't tell them anything. We basically look at it. It's a blood test that'll kind of show you your baseline. If it spikes, then it means you have cancer in your body. So I do that. I just don't do it every 3 months because, let's be honest, that's a lot. I have to call my doctor, be like, can you put that order in? Then I have to go to the lab and whatever. But I do have exams. I don't think about it like I would. I'm pretty, I wash, I do my thing, and I'm like, okay, I don't feel any lumps, I'm good. They're lumpy anyway because of all of the scar tissue, but I will see my plastic surgeon next month. I see him quite often. So there are things that I do. I can't have a mammogram because I don't want them squished. So if anything were to happen where I find a lump, it's an automatic ultrasound. So no more mammograms for me. But the chances, I have a less chance than anybody else in the population that hasn't had a mastectomy of breast cancer. My chances are that low now.
So how are you handling the scars and the feeling loss with intimacy? How have you found it's affected intimacy?
The scars?
And don't worry, Jessica does not mind sharing.
I don't, not at all. Not at all. So before I went in for the mastectomy, I kind of felt like I was being betrayed by my own body. I think that's a really weird way of saying it, but that's what it felt like. I would keep a shirt on and my boobs were still there. They were still mine, but I just felt a little betrayed, I think. And I didn't want Jeff to touch my boobs at all. Just for probably between that September and December time, it just it made you think differently about your body. The scars, they're very minimal. Like, I shouldn't say they're minimal. I have a lot of scars, but they're underneath. They go they go like this underneath my boobs now. Mandy, you've seen them. They're faded. My boobs are way bigger than what I had before. I had B cups before. I have full D's now. So Jeff loves my boobs. He loves these things and he wants them bigger. And he's crazy. I have to pack these suckers around. Intimacy wise, we're good. It hasn't really affected. I think if he acted like he didn't like them, then it would be a different situation. He freaking loves these things, even without the nipples. The nipples are the biggest hang up for me because nipples in the bedroom were huge for me. And it took a while to figure out how to get mine without having nipple stimulation. I have to work harder at it. And it is what it is. It's where toys come in. We're good. And a patient partner, because he knows that it's not as easy anymore. Nipple stimulation was a huge part of it for me. I miss it. I miss my nipples. But, nipples, cancer. I think I'm gonna go with getting rid of the nipples.
Honest answers here.
Honest answers. I'm an open book, guys.
Okay, book rec.
Okay, so I read this one years ago, but we're going to talk about it anyway. I'm just going to give you a little synopsis. So this is Heat for Hire by V.K. Ludwig. This is an alien romance, and it's kind of got a little bit of Omegaverse situation going to it. We have our heroine, who is Ellie, and she is traveling in space when she gets knocked off course and ends up kind of crash landing on this other planet. She had breast cancer. She didn't have a mastectomy. She had the lump removed, so she had a lumpectomy, but her one boob is very, there's a lot of scars, a lot of damage, it indents. There's, the nipple, she doesn't have sensation on that one side. She has it on the other side though, so lucky her, but she doesn't have it there. And she's very self-conscious about the scars. And part of that is that she couldn't get the reconstruction. Her insurance wouldn't cover it and whatever. She just didn't have the money for it at the time. So she gets to this planet, and she meets our hero, who is Ren, And in their world, there's like it's like an alpha omega situation, and she doesn't know that she's an omega, but she goes into heat when she meets him. The guy's got a weird peen and everything. It's really, really cool. It's not a very long book. It was definitely worth the read. And I remember messaging the author when I was reading this book, after I read this book, because the representation was so on point as far as what it felt like to not have sensation, because I don't have sensation in my chest. To not have sensation and to have somebody touch that and what that feels like. It was very on point. So yeah, I don't have feeling, guys. I don't have feeling from about here to here. And I don't have feeling on part of my stomach either.
Okay. Did the doctors give you food guidelines to help reduce cancer growth?
I remember them talking about it. I've heard like certain things that you're supposed to avoid when we first started the journey. And it's a lot of clean living and a lot of clean eating, which we already do. So I didn't, we didn't have to change much. But yeah, except for those burgers.
Where do those gummy bears fall under that?
They're clean. I wash them. But it's a lot of clean eating. So yes, they do give guidelines. They do talk to you about that.
Your gummy bears, you weirdo.
I don't wash my
or
gummy
your
bears.
Cheetos.
Cheetos? When do I eat Cheetos?
No, mozzarella sticks.
Oh yeah, that's when I splurge. Texas Roadhouse, anybody? Cheese fries. Yes,
Or
there is the nutrient, like when you go in for this, you like at Cancer Care, you didn't just meet with like your breast surgeon and your plastic surgeon. You also met with the geneticist, and you met with the nutritionist, and you like in the psychologist. Like it's a process. So yeah.
How long did it take you to feel like yourself again after surgery?
Well, it's been 4 years. Right now I feel like myself. I mean, I feel like I want to say a new me. I'm used to my body now, except for like when I went and got my tattoos and we were looking at pictures and I was like, holy cow, is that how big they are? Like, because I see in the mirror and then what they look like in pictures is a different thing. I do, right after surgery, I would rub my stomach a lot. And it was because I expect to find a belly there still, and it's not there. And I still tend to do that every once in a while where I just kind of brush my hands over my stomach, like it's flat. It's just weird. So I think it took a couple years. I mean, I had 2 years of surgeries. And so it probably took about another year after that before I was comfortable with my body. But I've had to learn like how to dress differently, and because I didn't have big boobs before and a flat tummy. I had to get a new wardrobe because everything that I had before was to hide the stomach that I had from having kids and stuff. So it's kind of interesting, but I feel pretty comfortable in my own body now.
I don't know, like feeling yourself, like we're always changing depending on things that have happened to us. And so you may never feel completely yourself again. You just feel like a new self.
I'm comfortable. Yeah, I'm comfortable in my own body at this point. Yeah. I just know that I have to be careful about gaining or losing weight because that affects the boobs. So, yeah.
All right. Next question. This is about, this person's just curious about insurance, out-of-pocket costs, medications, and your recovery. Was there any like physical therapy during your recovery?
So each state is different, but in the state of Washington, and there's a lot of states out there. I mean, I have support groups that I belong to, and we talk about this stuff all the time. But in the state of Washington, if you have a mastectomy, your insurance has to cover your reconstruction. And in most cases, they cover it at 100%. It's like losing a limb. If you were to lose an arm, you would get your prosthesis at 100%. These are my prostheses. This is my fix that situation. So I know that I had an out-of-pocket that had to be paid, and I think that was for the mastectomy itself and then for some other things, but the diep procedure was covered at 100%. We talk about these being my $1 million titties, and that's because they are. They're these, when you look at the costs that were billed to my insurance, we're about $500,000 each. So it is a very expensive procedure, but in most cases, in most states, it will be covered. You might have your out of pocket, but Jeff also has Gucci insurance, which is why I'm able to travel with my daughter and take her to a specialist, because we have really good insurance. I think the most I paid is about $5,000, but that was for a hospital stay, not for the reconstruction.
It does not take long to have your insurance costs skyrocket.
Especially not when you're.
When I hurt I was in a pretty horrific accident and messed my foot up in that accident and couldn't walk for 6 months. Which I will say, when you talk about like returning to your normal self, my accident was almost 5 years ago. Like, we're just a few weeks from it. And this year I started working with a personal trainer who has finally gotten me over like being afraid to do certain things with my foot, because I don't want to ever be back in that position again. So I've like avoided a lot of activities that would require me to do things that I felt were risky.
Yes.
And so she's been working with me to learn to trust my body again.
Mm-hmm.
But so it takes a while to get back to that stuff. But my foot surgery, I mean, it was pretty astronomical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I do know that the diep was covered 100%, and then I had, but and over those 2 years' time, I really want to say it was about that $5,000 that I paid, because that was my max out of pocket. And I hit it. I hit it when I was in the hospital before diep reconstruction, and then I hit it having all these surgeries the next year. So I really didn't have a lot of out of pocket. Physical therapy I did have. I have a good friend here in town who is a physical therapist, and she does the fascia something something. Basically, it works with your muscles, and she works with your it was a lot of massage physical therapy. I didn't have like actual like physical therapy. There was a lot of massage and a lot of cupping, trying to get rid of some of that the tightness in my body, because my body felt like it was like a bowstring. Like I just felt like I was gonna burst if I just bent the wrong way, because everything pulled so much, because the way it heals, right? It heals very tight. Now it's been 4 years now, and I feel like my stomach's loosened up where I can move and stuff, but I think the physical therapy helped a lot with that. So she did a lot of, I say massage, it sounds like it would be fun, but it was so uncomfortable being touched like that, because like of all the scar tissue and stuff. So yeah. Was there anything else in that question that I missed?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Oh, medication was on there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, these are big surgeries. These are huge surgeries. So, muscle relaxers were my friend during that time, and doctors are always cautious about how much they give out, but during this time they monitored it. But if I said I needed it, then I needed it. But again, I'm also not abusing it, and they could tell, obviously. Tylenol, ibuprofen were the big thing, but I did get some of the big guns during the surgeries. When I was in the hospital, I was on a morphine pump for the diep reconstruction, but morphine makes me puke, so I didn't get it for very long, because then I was puking. But I have a lot of drug allergies, so there were only certain things they could give me, so I was kind of limited. But luckily, they really watch it to make sure that you're not abusing it, and we were good. But yep, I had drugs.
So the next questions are kind of like after surgery questions. So I just want to bring up something that I don't know if people really like understand, because I think COVID was 5 years ago. And so for some of us, like there's some traumatic things, and, like depending on what your job was and what was happening in your life. But it feels like sometimes I think it's hard to like almost remember what test stuff was like that back then. And so for me, when I hurt was in my accident during COVID. And so I was one of the first people that were allowed to have surgery, because mine was in June of 2020 in Washington State. And so I do not like I don't not like doctors. I don't like medical stuff. It makes me very squeamy. I am a nervous wreck, and I don't do well with stuff like that. I had to lay down in the middle of the hospital floor when we had a tour of the birthing center, because I almost passed out. I just don't do well with stuff like that. And so Jay could not go in with me when I had to have my surgery. So Jay had to pull up and help me out of the car and leave. And I sat there and cried, because I was all alone. Nobody's in the waiting room, because nobody can go in there. And I just had to sit there and cry, because they would not let anybody go in with you. And I just sat there and cried and thought, I'm just gonna have him come get me. And I actually called him and I'm like, just come back and get me. I can't do this. I can't do this. And I'm like crying. And I'm like, I don't really need to walk.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Who needs to do
okay.
that? Yeah.
But I did it, and I didn't have to stay overnight. Like, basically, I'm waking up and they're like, okay, you're
Go
waking
home.
up. But they
Yep.
stuck me in a wheelchair and rolled me out the back door, basically. And Jay pulled around and picked me up, and I went home.
Mm-hmm.
You had your surgery when the governor again shut things down.
Yep.
And there were times where you would call me from the hospital all alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that people realize, without really thinking about that, what that is like, how hard that is
Yeah.
to be so alone in that situation, because no one can come see you. And there were times where Jeff was allowed to go in, but it's only
Not
Jeff.
by
But
much.
there were times where Jeff was literally dropping you off and having to go sit in the hotel and just wait for a call from the doctor.
Yes.
And it's just, I don't think people really understand
Mm-mm.
that unless you went through it.
Yeah. I think that was probably the hardest part. Jeff is my rock, right? Like that's who I go to when these times are hard. And I was alone the whole time. And now you got me crying again. What's up with
I'm
that?
sorry.
I was alone. I was my
I just think that's an
mastectomy.
important part of the story.
Yes,
And I
it
think
is. It
that's
really is.
something that when all these decisions were being made, and during COVID, because
Mhm.
my mom passed away at like the very beginning of COVID,
Yeah.
and I had to take her to the doctor, and they would not let me go in with her into the hospital. And she went to the emergency room because the doctor told
Hmm.
her to, and they wouldn't let me go in. And then I had to leave her there, and she
Yes.
got admitted and was there for like almost a week, where they told her she had cancer and she had only a couple months to live, and she
Yeah.
had to find that out in the hospital all alone.
Alone. Yes.
And then I'm like at home, I can't do anything. I'm having
Mm-mm.
to wait for a doctor to call me. I can't be in there with her. Like, it was
Yeah. It was hard.
horrific.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
2020 sucked ass for me. I mean, you
Yes.
take out COVID and it was like the worst year of my life
It
without
was
even being
horrible.
in COVID.
Yeah.
And I think the trauma that people went through during this
Hmm.
time with healthcare just really did not get acknowledged enough. And
No.
I understand where people may have thought that they were making good decisions, but I almost think that in some ways that those decisions were more damaging to people.
Hmm. Hmm.
I actually stand by it. It was
Yeah.
extremely damaging and
Yeah.
traumatizing for
Yes.
people.
Yeah.
And
And
so
I
unless
think
people know people who went through that, I don't think it's something that's talked about enough.
no, no. And I think, so it started with the mastectomy because that was in December. And for us in Washington, our lockdown went really a long time, especially within the medical field. Like
Mhm.
it was almost the whole time I was alone. So my mastectomy, you're supposed to stay the night in a hospital when you have a mastectomy. I had to stay at a hotel near the hospital because they didn't want to keep us overnight, but they didn't want us to go all the way because it's 2.5 hours to Seattle where all my surgeries were. So they didn't want us to go home either. So we stayed in a hotel. Jeff dropped me off. No, he came in with me and sat with me until they took me back into surgery, and then he went and waited at the hotel. And then when I had my infection, I thought I was dying. I was in so much pain. I didn't care if I was dying. We had a 2.5 hour drive down to Seattle. And he took me to the emergency room, and the doctors immediately admitted me. They brought him back to say goodbye to me, and that was it. And I was in the hospital. I mean, I had a panic attack that night because I was in so much pain and I was alone, and I was alone. And the nurses were amazing. They actually turned out to be, because they put me back on that transplant floor, they were actually the nurses that I had when I had my deep flap reconstruction. And they remembered me because I was there for a week by myself in the hospital. And I got close to those nurses. And then they were the same nurses I had when I had my deep flap. So Jeff dropped me off for that thing. I was infected. I was sick. They were afraid that I was septic at that point. And turned out I wasn't, but I had all the signs of it. And so then he had to drive home. He had to turn around and drive 2.5 hours home and wait for me. Same thing with my deep flap. He brought me down, dropped me off for surgery, gave me a kiss goodbye. And that was a 14-hour surgery. And I mean, granted, my doctor was amazing and he would call him through it, but he turned around and drove home with the kids. And then a week later had to come down and get me. It was very hard. I was going through the hardest thing in my life, and I did not have the one person that I needed. So it was hard. It was a crappy time to be going through all of this. I mean, people are like, oh, it made you stronger. Well, I didn't have a choice. I mean, you either suck it up and deal with it or you don't. I mean, what are you going to do? So, luckily for me, Jeff would take all of my drunken sounding phone calls whenever I called. So, because I was drugged, but I had amazing
I also
doctors.
took all your phone calls and all the
You
pictures.
did. You did. It's great. Did I call you when I saw my belly button for the first time? Do you remember that?
You called me. I mean, we talked so
All the
much.
time.
Well, we always talk so
I remember
much,
seeing my belly button for the first time in my flat stomach right after deep and like breaking down crying because it was so pretty. And because I had a crater before all this, kids and stuff. But I remember making phone calls, crying about my belly button. I was really drugged up. Really drugged up. So.
Yep. All right. Okay. Upkeep. Is there any maintenance that you'll need?
No, if they start to sag, I can always go in. So it'll be covered under insurance for my lifetime to have any kind of adjustments made. So if I decide that they're sagging, which they're not sagging yet, they still look like 20-year-old boobies. Are they sagging? You're the one that sees them all the time. I take they're not sagging yet, are they? They're sagging. Then I can go in and have them perked back up. But for right now, no.
Okay. Let's do another book rec.
Okay. So this one book, I really loved it for the journey. This is Chasing Butterflies by Josephine Brierly. I will say the dialogue in this one gets a little choppy because she uses the person's name in like almost every sentence, like whoever the person's talking to, they use their name, and that's just weird. But anyhow, the story itself is great. If you can get past this, I highly recommend this book. This is about our heroine who is really young. Lori, she's in her 20s. She's on a trip with her boyfriend. They're getting frisky and there's something leaking out of her nipple and she knows that that's not normal. She goes home and gets checked and it's breast cancer. And so she opts for a double mastectomy, and then she eventually gets implants, and then eventually she actually has nipple reconstruction, which is something that I chose not to do. In the meantime, her boyfriend is a douche canoe. They break up and she starts a relationship with her boss. And so this really is we just really see her full story through this whole thing. I highly recommend it. I know there's not a lot of information, but it is a really emotional journey and it's a really good one to read.
All right. You've mentioned tattoos. Can you share what they are? Generally, anything flowers is fine. Apologize for the very personal question, but you've spoken about the scars and the loss of feeling.
Oh, yeah.
There is nothing too personal for Jessica, by the way.
There's nothing. I don't know if you guys can see much of it. It's very, it is flowers. So it starts with the infinity. Oh, look at, yes, thumbs up. It starts with an infinity symbol over here, and then it goes diagonally this way. I wanted it higher up on my chest because if I go in and have, if I decide to go in eventually and have them perked up, he pulls this down and cinches it underneath. So I wanted to leave room for that to happen. But it's got Scottish thistle and lavender and blackberries, and there's a couple bumblebees and lilacs. And I did that. The Scottish thistle is my favorite flower, and the lavender is one of my daughters, and the lilac is for my great grandmother, and as well as my grandma. And it's really the bumblebees are for my youngest daughter. So it's all the women in our family are represented in it. So, and we have Irish Scottish heritage, and so that's where I went with that. So what's in the middle? Oh yeah, there's a heart. It's a heart. You can't see it, guys. This, I did my sternum and it has a Celtic heart there. So yeah, that's what it is.
I'm still very disappointed that you didn't go with my suggestion.
What was your suggestion again?
Really?
Yeah, I forgot. It was really a painful time in my life when they were doing it.
It was my name.
Oh, yes, straight across my boobs. I will say, so I did talk about not having sensation. I didn't feel this side until they got like to about here, and then I felt that. The sternum, 100% felt it, especially when they kept hitting certain spots. There's a spot where it like, I don't know if I can show this. There's a spot here, right here underneath, and it connects, like you can feel this, the scar right there, and he would hit that. And I felt it up into my throat. It was so painful when he hit that scar tissue. And then I felt the side for some reason. I could tell, it's higher up, which is why I have sensation here. So I didn't feel it when it was like here, but I felt it was here. So it's just there. So yeah. And because I can't feel my boob, there's a few spots where like the color pulled because it would get attached to my shirt when I was sleeping. So he'll have to go and fix that eventually, but I'm not doing it right now because I couldn't feel that things were getting attached.
What have you learned about yourself through this process?
I'm stronger than I think I am.
You're very resilient.
I'm very resilient, obviously. I mean, I didn't really have that much of a choice, but I did it and stronger for it.
And now you can share your story.
And now I can help others. And that's
Yes.
what's the most important thing. And also this doesn't define me. This is not who I am. This is something I lived through, but it's not who I am. And it's just a part of my history. It's part of my past. It's just a piece of me. It's not me.
Do you have any regrets?
Not one. I miss my nipples. But no, I would do it again in a heartbeat. If it ensured that I would be here to see my grandchildren and to see my kids grow up and to grow old with Mandy and Jeff,
Thank you.
then you're welcome. It's what needed to be done. I mean, and I do think, one of the things too that we learned is we have absolutely no control over what happens with our lives. We think that we have control, but we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So I may have done all of this and then something else may take me out one day and it not be cancer. Or I might still, I mean, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But for right now, I've done everything in my power to make sure that I'm here. The rest is in God's hands, and that's his plan. So we'll see what happens. But I did my job. Mm-hmm.
What are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of the way that I handled it with the kids. My kids' outlook on this is very positive, and I think that, I don't want to pat myself on the back as a parent because we make tons of mistakes, but I think we did this one right. They're not scared of it. And they just know that it's something, right? So, I'm proud that I made it through with a positive attitude too. And a lot of people struggle, but I made my mind up and went for it. So, and my new belly button is pretty.
Yes.
Can't feel it, but it's pretty.
Yeah. All right. That is all the questions, but I do believe you still have some more book recs for us.
I do. I have one more. I think I have two more actually. So this one, and then you have one, right?
Yes.
So the next book, the next recommendation I have is When the Duke Was Wicked by Lorraine Heath. And so this is a historical. This is about Lady Grace. She has this huge inheritance and she wants to find love. She doesn't want somebody to marry her from the town who is like just after her money. And so she asks a lifelong friend and a recent widower to help her find somebody who's really going to love her. Now she has had a single mastectomy, and she is self-conscious of that. Now he's wicked, like he's a widower, but he has been playing the town ever since. And of course, being together all the time, they're gonna fall in love with each other, and he's gonna love her, single booby or not. So that is pretty much their story. She's been hiding the fact that she had a mastectomy. Obviously, there was no reconstruction because this was back in the day, and I don't think that was available. I'm pretty sure it wasn't. So there's that one. And then the last one that I have, I think this is the last one. Let me just double check here. Yes. So this one is called Imperfect, and it's by April Wilson. I really, honestly, can I just say I hate that title because even if you decide to stay flat or you only have one, you are not imperfect. It's just what it is. Like, but anyhow, this is about Jamie, who's a Navy SEAL, and he's lost his eyes. He's lost his vision in a blast when out in the field. And then you have Molly, who is our heroine, and she had the double mastectomy and decided to stay flat, and her husband was cheating on her because of it. And so they actually, she leaves her husband and she moves into an apartment, and across the way is where Jamie is living, and they strike up a friendship, and then things go from there. So she's happy, like he's not that she's happy that he's blind, but with him being blind, she's able to hide the fact that she's flat for longer. And so we see her struggle with that in her own body image. So I really enjoyed that one as well. Wasn't perfect, but it was good. You have one though too.
I do have one. You have not read this, so I'm going to tell you what it's about and I'm going to challenge you to read it.
Okay, I'll read it.
Okay, this is Hating You, Loving You by Crystal Caswell.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a hot minute since I've read it, but this is about Chloe and Dean. Dean works at a tattoo shop and he took Chloe's virginity like 6 years ago. And it sounds like, based on, I'm going off the blurb because I didn't want to give away any spoilers. So the blurb makes it sound like he ghosted her. And there's obviously reasons, which you find out throughout the book. And she ends up getting an apprenticeship at this tattoo place. And so her and Dean end up back in each other's worlds again. And she had the mastectomy and she's having to go in for another scan because they found something and she's like really freaked out about it. Dean is pierced and he has no problem showing that off to anyone. Yeah. So we kind of have like very different personalities, but Dean is going to end up being a rock for her in many ways. So I really enjoyed it. I rated it 4 stars. I felt like some of her anxiety and things paralleled some of how you felt. Obviously not exactly, but it felt authentic to me based on my knowledge from you.
Yeah. Well, and you just saw me go through that in February where
yes, but I read this before that. So
yeah, exactly.
You know,
yeah.
So I think you should read it and let us know if it holds up for this.
Yeah. That whole after the fact and finding lumps, let me tell you, that's no fun. Mandy will tell you that I stood there for 5 minutes hugging Natasha and trying not to cry. So, because she understands for her own reasons, but yeah, that's no fun after the fact. So you do get scared. It doesn't fix everything. There's still times where you're gonna get a little wigged out and refer to Mandy as your buddy. So you were thinking it.
I was.
Yep. So
yeah,
it's all good. But okay, guys, so there you have it. This is a longer video, but you wanted my story, you got it. If you have any other questions, definitely put them below and I'll answer them. I think I hit the most, like I hit most of the topics there. We do have another video that kind of talks about this and gives like the same recs or some of the same recs, but I will put it in the cards here too, just in case you want to go back. It might tell you something more than what we told you in this video. But I think we hit most of it.
Yeah.
So right now
2 years and then a little over an hour.
Exactly. See, look at us. And now really it's just, I go to see my breast surgeon here next month because that necrosis might need to come out. So we'll see what happens there. And I'm waiting on results for my kids and praying that God performs a miracle, and none of them have it because it does affect my son too. So it can affect male breast cancer, prostate cancer, those kinds of things are involved. So he needs to know. So, and then my other kid will get tested when she's 18.
Also, a real positive that came out of this is where like a good chunk of your reading journey really started, was when you're going through this.
Yeah, I started reading, early 2020 before we went into lockdown, but I stepped away from reading fanfic into actually reading, and then being on bed rest and being like in the hospital all the time. Yep, I was reading, and it started the downward spiral, and here we are today.
Starting in January of 2020, I had 4 surgeries in 2 years, all medically necessary.
Yeah.
Just really unfortunate that they were all so close together.
Yes.
And my very last surgery, I've always been a reader, but I wasn't like actively reading. But my last surgery, I was actively reading. And there's times where I'm like, when I had my foot surgery and my accident, and I couldn't walk for 6 months, like I went through some very dark times during that. It was really trying for me, and I really had to lean on my faith. Also, my mom had just passed away like not even 3 weeks, like a week and a half prior to my accident. So there was a lot going on. So it wasn't just the walking that was a dark time for me. But
Yeah.
sometimes I wonder, like, if I would have been an avid reader then, would that have helped me get through that a little bit better?
I think it was a help for me because I escaped. I escaped
Mm-hmm.
the reality, and that's what we talk about reading being an escape. Like it truly was. I recall like being when I had the infection, I was in the hospital. I was doing a reread of books because I was so doped up. It was hard to like really
Mm-hmm.
read. But I remember listening to Joanna Wild's MC at the hospital, like in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep, and so that's what I was doing. I was doing a reread of
Yeah.
that. Like I escaped. So yeah.
When I had my last surgery, my husband was able to go in with me, but he couldn't, like, once they take you back and start hooking up to your IVs, like your person can't go with you,
Yeah.
like past that point. And so I was sitting there and they were getting ready to do that. And I'm like, do you mind if I keep reading? It helps
Oh yeah.
distract me. And she's like, oh, that's totally fine. So I'm like sitting here while she's doing all that. And normally I get very squeamish and I would be like, oh my God, I'm about to pass out.
Mm-hmm.
And have to lay
I,
down and all that stuff. But I just read through it and I'm like, oh, this is so much better. And then
so I had to tell my nurses. I told my nurses before every surgery. I am a romance reader. I do not know what is going to come out of my mouth when I come out of surgery, and I am going to apologize right now because I was reading a dirty scene before you took me back into surgery. And they would just laugh. They thought it was hilarious. And I'm like, I'm friggin' serious here. I do not know what's going to come out of my mouth because I did. I read before surgery. I would have it. I took just with my phone, but I was always reading until they took me back.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Anyway,
Anyway. All right. My phone's about to die. So let's cut this off.
yeah, I have stuff to do today.
Yeah, same. I got to go Easter food shopping. So, yay. All right, guys. Well, thank you for listening and thank you for caring so much to actually want to know what I went through. So, hopefully, this helps some people. I do know that we have a few viewers who are in the midst of this right now. So, hopefully, this helps. It'll be over. It'll be 4 years down the road before you know it. And it's just a blip. So, that's what we're hoping for.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah. All
Well,
right.
thank you, Jessica, for sharing your story. I know that it will be a blessing for many people.
I hope so.
I appreciate that about you. I know I give you crap about being an oversharer, but I truly believe this is a gift for you to be able to
Yes.
help other people.
And that's ultimately like the best thing when I get to help people who are in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So thanks for joining us. If you just happened to find us so you could listen to this story, we'd love to have you as a subscriber. So hit that subscribe button. We do lots of book recs and we are fun people.
We are. We really are. I know I cried a little bit. Hey, this video is proof that I can cry.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
look at that. Yeah. All right.
Yes. So thank you guys so for joining us. And so
Yeah.
we would love to have you as subscribers. And like Jessica said, comment below any questions you have and make sure you check back on Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays for new videos from us.
Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video.